Good morning, everyone. We have a really interesting discussion this morning talking about the Pacific Alliance with three of the best experts I can think of to discuss the alliance. Gentlemen, thank you. Now, we will start talking about the Pacific Alliance, which is something that some of you in the audience have never heard about. And we'll start by talking about what the Pacific Alliance is. But first of all, let me introduce our panelists. We'll start with Jose Luis Silva, former Minister of Trade in Peru. In fact, he was one of the key negotiators of the Pacific Alliance. And then we have Ronald Bown, who is the chairman of the board for Chilean fruit exporters. And then Juan Emilio Posada, who's co-president of Puerto, Brisa in Colombia. Gentlemen, why don't we start with Jose Luis and talk about the Pacific Alliance. And tell us, please, what is the Pacific Alliance?
Good morning. The Pacific Alliance is a political and economic agreement between the four countries that have been leading the free market in Latin America. Going from north to south is Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile. Four countries that in the last 20 years, maybe a little bit more, have been promoting bilateral and multilateral agreements to promote trade. I have had the opportunity, while I was minister, to start the negotiations of the economic and commercial agreement between the four countries. And the idea is that in a very short period, these four countries will be like a free zone. The people can move with no need of visas. The money, the capital can move from one country to the other with any kind of restraint. And these four countries are making a big change in Latin America. Now almost, if I'm not wrong, four countries are observers. Costa Rica will be a member soon. Even Argentina, now that Mrs. Kirchner is not anymore in power, has asked to be part of the Pacific Alliance. We have countries like Australia, New Zealand that want to be part of it. And for sure, the Pacific Alliance will be the best partners for countries of the Middle East so that we can start promoting different kinds of businesses together.
Let me ask you, there is, before I go to the other panelists, there is an alphabet soup of alliances, trade alliances in Latin America. A number of people have said that the Pacific Alliance is the strongest and perhaps the most important. Why do you think that's the case?
There are two big alliances in Latin America. Mercosur, that it's, let's say, the ex-Chavez or Chavez countries that are more interested in making intra-regional trade, while the Pacific Alliance is promoting extra-regional and not only promoting a trade in one direction, a bilateral direction. I think that the Pacific Alliance, for far, is the best association of countries, or I don't know how to say it, that will promote a fair trade between these countries and the rest of the world.
Mr. Bown, let's move to you talking about how the Pacific Alliance really impacts specific products. Let's talk about, in your case, how does the Pacific Alliance benefit your industry?
Well, thank you very, very much for the invitation. Well, of course, the Pacific Alliance for us is something that it goes further away from what we call free trade. Chile is being considered as a leader in free trade, I would say worldwide. We have more than 24 free trade agreements and with 66, 64 economies. And what we foresee in terms of this alliance is, as you said before, to improve the relation between countries, between persons, between governments, between institutions, to have a better development for both, for all of them. But of course, what we foresee there is that something that is related with, in our case, specific case of the fruit exports, the flow of persons. That is one of the objectives also regarding the free flow of persons between Peru, Chile, Colombia, and Mexico. That is not a big issue regarding professionals, but in the case of agriculture, of course, it's a problem in terms of our workers, that they feel they are sometimes attacked by foreigners. They're trying to take their job away. But it's something we are dealing with. It's not easy. But the other, maybe more important, is regarding the phytosanitary conditions. The flow of people, cars, and vehicles need to have a better control of them, the people and also vehicles. And sometimes we have a big pressure in the borders because a lot of for the tourism and also workers that are coming to our country.
Mr. Posada, Colombia. Talk about how the Pacific Alliance impacts Colombia and how Colombia benefits from it.
It creates a 200 million people market compared to a 45 million people country. So that is a very concrete benefit for Colombian business people. It really focuses a lot on social inclusion, which is, in my opinion, extremely important, is one of the three pillars of the alliance. And it's not only economic growth, but making sure that those who have been left out in economic growth are being brought to reduce income inequality. I think it is crucial, and we have seen it in the US vote for Trump. Therefore, those 200 million people are going to benefit from lower barriers, either trade barriers or people movement barriers or technology movement barriers. Those 200 million people are going to be in a better condition compared to independent protectionist regimes. And specifically after the 8th of November, they will have an alternative to whatever happens in the US if the US starts building up walls.
Mr. Posada, you brought up Mr. Trump, and I want to get to that shortly. But before I do, let me remind the audience two opportunities to participate. One, through the app. If you have questions, be sure to ask questions via the app, and then I'll be happy to ask those on your behalf. But even more so, I'll be happy to come to you if you have a question, and we'll have that opportunity for questions shortly. Please raise your hand, and I'll come and allow you. And I want this to be not just gentlemen on stage answering questions. I want it to be very much a conversation among all of us. So, Mr. Posada, Mr. Trump, you talked about the election and what impact that will have. I wanted to get a response from everyone. What impact, indeed, do you think that Mr. Trump's election will have on trade between either your countries and the U.S. or even among yourselves? Why don't we start with Mr. Posada, since you were the first one to bring it up?
I guess the question that governments of other countries are going to have to answer is whether they want to face a slowdown in trade negotiations that involve the U.S., or if they prefer to focus on other blocks of large markets and wait and see what the U.S. is going to really want to do, whether it wants to enclose itself and isolate from the rest of the world or not.
Mr. Bown?
Very difficult question, but I would say that what we're seeing right now in the U.S. is that something is changing, not only the president, it's the way the country is conducted. Nowadays, or what we foresee in the future, is something different that's happening right now, where you have a political view to decide what to do. You have people thinking about what to do. Now, from next inauguration days on, you're going to have one person defining what to do in the States. That's what you can see from what is happening. But of course, I hope that the Republican Party will take their properly what they need to do, and it's not going to be very easy for him to put in place many of the issues that they have already said that he's going to do. So I think that's a good opportunity for the Pacific Alliance also. If there will be a slowdown regarding the Trans-Pacific Partnership, will be a good opportunity for our alliance to be maybe the way to give possibilities to the other countries to be part and face the opportunities in the Asia-Pacific area in a better way. I think it's an opportunity.
Mr. Silva, you are in a unique position as a government official, at least former government official, who negotiated some of these trade deals. When you look at the election, what concerns, if any, do you have?
Well, today early in the morning when I wake up, I was thinking, this is the day after, as the film After the Apocalypse. I hope it is not. I think that Mr. Trump is full of hot air, and what he has said when he has been in campaign, maybe he will not do everything what he said, but at least he has to show that what he had to offer, some of the things he will do it. So I think that we will have certain issues like slower pace in the negotiation of the TPP. Next week, President Obama, President Putin, the President of China, and all the economies that are part of the TPP will be present in my country. I don't know if it's possible to close the negotiation of the TPP next week in Lima, and if it's possible that during this period of changes, it can be approved by the Congress in the US. If not, we will have a slower pace in the negotiation. That's how I see it. But as we were talking, it's a good opportunity. Although the US has marketed itself as the free trade leader, Middle East companies know that they have barriers in the US. I think that the countries of the Pacific Alliance will be very keen to receive investments and increase the trade among these two parts of the world. As we were talking yesterday, our countries have a lot of influence of the Arabic world, of the Arabic countries. Important businessmen, important leaders in our countries are Arab descendants. And for sure we will continue having extraordinary relations. And I'm sure that we must think that the election of Mr. Trump is a good opportunity for the rest of the world to bond relations.
But Mr. Silva, why should we not believe Mr. Trump when he says the U.S. so far has negotiated just terrible trade deals? In fact, he says, I think, just a disaster, some of the deals, and I'm sure among the ones that he is referring to is the TPP. You said that there's a big meeting coming up. Why should we not believe that the TPP is about to lose maybe its largest partner?
Well, I hope not. Usually what it happens, because I've seen the change when Mr. Bush signed the agreement between Peru and the US, immediately after, when Mr. Obama and there was a change in the Congress of the US, they make certain changes, slight changes, so that they were, let's say, happy with it. I suppose that Mr. Trump will make certain kind of changes, sorry I repeat the word, to comply what he said during the campaign. But I think that he will not stop what it has been done. When Mr. Humala, the past president in Peru, he was a left-sided candidate. When he went in the office, well, sorry, during his campaign, he said that he will, let's say, cancel all the free trade agreements of Peru. Well, I was his first minister of trade, and as soon as I was in office, I started new free trade agreements and signed some of them. So I think that one thing is what you say when you are in campaign, another thing is when you are in the office. And there are like locks in the free trade agreements that a president is not able to change it immediately. It takes several years to make changes.
Well, as far as you're saying, it's continuation. This is an issue that I'm sure that many people in the audience have a thought about. Does anyone want to add a comment about your concern or your thoughts along the lines of what the election of Mr. Trump might impact this issue? Please, if you would stand.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Hisham Bendida from HBC Partners, and I have a question for José Luis Martinot. We've talked about Mercosur, we've talked about Pacific Alliance, you were one of the negotiators. As of today, is there an alliance that's being negotiated between Latin America and the GCC? And if there's one, which country is currently pushing for it? Thank you.
There's no alliance between the GCC and Peru, and I think there's no agreement between the GCC and a Latin American country. All Latin American countries are interested in increasing the trade between our countries. I mentioned it yesterday, our countries 6 years ago was trading $7 million with the Emirates, with Arab Emirates. We have closed in $400 million in July, and we expect to close the year in $6 $600 million. So we have increased it almost 100 times in only 6 or a little bit more than 6 years. So there's a big possibility of increasing the trade between these two parts of the world.
You know, there's tremendous opportunity for trade between the GCC and countries in Latin America. And that's where I want to turn next. But before I do that, I want to make sure to close the loop on Trump and his impact on potential trade deals. If there's anyone in the audience that wanted to add anything to what we've heard on that issue. Okay. So let's move on to talk about the GCC and its trade with Latin America. Mr. Silva mentioned that many years ago, Peru took the opportunity to get involved, and it's reaped great dividends. Let's talk about Colombia and its trade with the GCC, and what are the opportunities and what impact you think the Pacific Alliance can have on that?
The trade between Colombia and the GCC and the UAE is very incipient. It has increased a lot percentually, from $7 to $30 million, but it's almost negligible compared to the opportunities. So that is a true opportunity, and the more closer the ties are with Emirates Airlines coming into the region, and all the trade lines moving from Dubai and Abu Dhabi to the region, the more trade we will be having as an opportunity to continue to grow. Peru is a good example, you know, moving to $600 million now. And Jose Luis was mentioning that Brazil was selling $2 billion in chicken. So, you know, when I see the glass as less than half empty, and there is a major opportunity to grow in that trade.
Mr. Bown, we heard that a lot of chickens are coming to this region from Latin America. How about fruit?
Well, it's, we would like to have maybe more trade with this area. We send a lot of fruit, maybe a little around 100,000 tons every year, but not as much as I would like to have much more trade with this area, and I think it's possible. Fruit business is not easy. You know, you need to have not only good transportation, also you have a very specific type of fruit that can travel adequately. But we are focused in many other countries that are maybe 45 days away from our country by vessel, and we are selling our cherries, for example, in China in a very, very good conditions, and more than 100,000 tons every year. So possibilities are there, and we are still growing in terms of new products and new varieties, and we are open to deal with anyone that's are willing to buy our fruit.
Mr. Silva, let's talk about, I mean, you've had remarkable success, Peru, with dealing with the region. Let's talk about how you were able to do it. If you can give us some real examples about how you were able to have this remarkable success.
Well, I think it's the people. Our office here has a person that is in charge, Álvaro Silva Santisteban, that has worked together with the other persons of the offices in Latin America and offices of other countries to promote the bilateral trade, and he has done a great job. I'm sure that it's also thanks to the support of the Ministry of Trade that has given the resources to promote the trade, and it's also thanks to the business people that committed with the export of products to the world. Peru, 20 or 30 years ago, only exported oil, sugar, and minerals. Now, we can say that maybe 20% of the population that is that has a good job is related to the export of product with added value. So it's very important the decisions that as a country we have been taking in the last years, in the last 2 or 3 decades, that permit us to be in this position, and for sure it's thanks to the richness of our country. We can say that we have almost everything. What we need is the capitals to promote the good exploitation of these resources.
Mr. Bown, you wanted to get in here.
Yes, I think we need to talk also in terms of what we can do, not only as a country, but also as a group of countries. In the case of Chile and Peru, we have many things that we're doing together, or that we can mix in terms of the delivery, for example, of table grapes, and where you can enhance the season. And we can do it with Chilean grapes, and later on with, or before, Peruvian grapes, and many other products that we can share in terms of the benefits that can you take from them. And of course, what we are doing in that is a very interesting thing that we're doing in terms of that issue, is that we are having, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 offices together, as the 4 countries, commercial offices in, I think, the north part of Africa, and where else more? Where? Morocco. Yeah, that's not part of Africa, but we have another one, or not?
Ghana.
But maybe that's the first one. And it's interesting in terms that if we can do that together, that will allow us to share also opportunities for both, for all the countries.
I'm wondering if there's anyone in the audience who is considering, either on behalf of your countries or on behalf of your companies, of doing business with Latin America. If you can, we can talk about how you expect the Pacific Alliance to impact that. Before I go on to that, I wanted to ask Mr. Posada, your country has recently signed a historic trade deal, a peace deal between the FARC and the government. And what do you see as the real dividend of peace in terms of some of potential trade deals?
I think the best dividend of a final peace agreement with the guerrillas will be the allocation of defense-related funds to education in the country, and the reallocation of our own mental energy and focus on doing business as opposed to having to think about our own security. And that will really have a major multiplier effect in terms of effectiveness of business people, and that will benefit the whole country. That's really a huge investment in defense that will not be required anymore.
And where do you see some of those opportunities?
Mainly being more effective, more efficient, more productive, more competitive, and therefore creating more employment, educating more people with more funds allocated to education, and therefore competing with other countries and exporting more.
Mr. Bown, we were talking about exporting more, talking about fruit. What do you see as some of the real challenges, the difficulties in getting some of your farmers, because I understand you are part of a much larger cooperative, to get some of your farmers to see the GCC region as a real source of opportunity and potential income?
Well, Chile, as I said before, Chile has a very good experience in terms of free trade, but we think that we need to do a little bit more in terms of trying to avoid some issues that still pending in the world regarding free trade. There is a lot of Asian countries that are still having high taxes in terms of the imports. We need to work together to negotiate and lower down. If we negotiate the 4 countries together, we are going to have better opportunities for that. We need that. Another challenge is related with what are not only countries doing in terms of free trade, what are people of certain countries doing to avoid the entry of some goods that they don't like because they're going to threaten their own business. We have been facing in the area of Australia, New Zealand, for example, our grapes being not allowed to enter by the local growers. We have free trade agreements with them, but the people doesn't want that, and that's something that we need to eliminate. And the other thing is related with issues that are very difficult to understand. You still have in place in this free trade world some organizations that are selling, for example, in a sort of a monopoly, their goods to the world. In New Zealand, you still have a state-owned or a state-supported entity that has the monopoly to sell all the kiwis from New Zealand. And that's a very unfair competition because any one of us can do what they are doing in New Zealand because they have one only possibility to sell inside the country, one organization that's selling outside, and of course they have more, a better possibilities to compete, meaning by that they're using also some more possibilities. They have more possibilities than we have in terms of negotiation with the trade. They are not using also, they are using some forms of trade that are not allowed in some countries. And today, we can, as a summary of what's going on in the kiwi fruit business, you can see, and we were talking about who are the losers when you don't have a free trade, are the consumers. If you compare the price, the average price, world price average of kiwi, and you compare with the price that kiwi Sespri is selling in those countries that they are sort of a monopoly, the consumer is paying around $140 million every year above the world average price. So that's something that's you can believe that still you have those type of state-supported organization dealing in this type of activity.
Which brings up a question. I was wondering to Ms. Jose Luis Silva about some of the barriers that we see. I mean, as we mentioned earlier, you've had tremendous success in doing business here, but what were some of the difficulties? What are some of the barriers that you had to break down in order for you to achieve this success?
I think it's only a mental barrier. It's a mental barrier. Usually, and that's understandable, when you are a small company, you will start trading locally and then start trading with the countries around your own country. But now with the globalization, now that the communications have changed, now that people can move very easily, now that the transportation is fast and safer, there should not be anything that impossibilitates the trade. Peru, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, all the countries of the Pacific Alliance have like a new class of businessmen that are seeking, making new businesses around the world. And I think we have done a great job. I think that now we are closer. We have investments all of our countries. I can mention some of them in my country. The most important port where most of our exports go to the world is a Dubai port. DP World made it, and DP World operates it. The most important energy plant in Peru is now owned by a fund of Abu Dhabi. The Peru, and my colleagues here can say if I'm telling the truth or not, Peru is now the place to go if you want to eat the best food in Latin America. Yeah, and the most important food restaurants of Peruvian food are owned by Abrash, a fund of Dubai, if I'm not wrong. And I can continue several areas of Peruvian economy where companies from this part of the world and funds of this part of the world are now controlling in Peru. What the region needs is capitals, and what we can offer are the best opportunities for those investments.
Thank you, Jose Luis. Let me just remind everyone that if you have any questions, you can send them via the app, or you can raise your hand and I will come to you, because this is a great opportunity to have three real recognized experts in doing trade deals with whether it's this region or other parts of the world to address some of your questions. I want to talk a little bit about the future. There were, Mr. Bown, there were some, in some circles, not all, but certainly in some circles, when your president, Bachelet, came into power, about how supportive she was going to be about the Pacific Alliance. There's been no question since then that she is completely on board. What do you think, what kind of signals do you think that sends to the rest of the world? Not only we have strong leaders now, but also, despite what's happening elsewhere, that the Pacific Alliance seem to be as strong as ever.
Well, we can face maybe many political changes in Chile, but in terms of free trade, in terms of our connection to the world, there will be no change at all. We are committed, and the only way in terms of development is to continue to be a free trader and a very open country. So in that specific issue, there was and there are not going to be any change in terms of our policy regarding the open of our economy.
Mr. Posada, I know you recently had change in administration actually in Colombia. You haven't had a change of administration, but let me go though to Mr. Luis Silva in Peru. I know you recently had a change of administration there, and talk about the commitment of your leader to free trade and to the Pacific Alliance.
Well, I think that all our countries have learned of the past. In our country, there have been several changes of president. I think that the opening of Peruvian market to the world began with Mr. Fujimori in 1990. And after that, we have had several presidents. After him, at least 5 or 6 changes. Now, Mr. Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, our new president, he's a person that has been working for global companies. He used to have or manage 2 or 3 funds in this part of the world. So he's a person totally committed with a free market, and for sure there will be no changes. He will put, let's say, gas on them to continue. I think that the world is changing, and it's changing very quickly. And what we have to do is make businesses between us. As I said minutes ago, here there are capitals that want to have a good return. I think that Latin America, and especially the countries of the Pacific Alliance, are the best place to invest.
And how about Colombia?
I'll give you an example of Colombia hasn't had the change of presidents during the alliance. It's a young alliance, and it was established in April 2011, right? So it's only 5.5 years. But in those 5.5 years, as of today, the liberalization of trade is reaching 100% of all goods among the 4 countries this year. That is a very fast pace, and that's what I want to highlight is a pragmatic alliance that was born out of interest in free trade, is going very quickly and is going through different political changes in all the countries because it is focused on business.
I know we have just a little time left, but we have a question.
My name is Pramod Dayal. I'm basically a mineral processing engineer and based in Dubai. My question is, there is a lot of technological advancement in Peru and other Latin American countries on mineral resources. Now, what about technology cooperation to identify resources in UAE in particular? Is there any thought on that side? Because there is a possibility there is good copper and gold in UAE also.
Good copper and gold in UAE.
I was not able, because there were some people talking at the back. Can he repeat the question, please, again?
Basically, what I'm saying is, what about technology cooperation with UAE to identify mineral resources in UAE? Because Peru is very advanced in copper technology as well as gold. So what about some help in this direction?
Well, first, the Pacific Alliance is the #1 copper exporter, the #1 silver exporter, if we put together the 4 countries. Peru is a mining exporter country, and for sure there's a lot of experience there. Right now, Peruvian techniques, Peruvian professionals are around the world working in different mining companies, global mining companies. And if you are interested in that kind of cooperation, I can contact you with people that will help. It can be in the public sector or in the private sector. Please, I'll be happy to help you.
And how about technological cooperation, which is one of the issues the gentleman addressed? Technological cooperation with countries of the UAE.
There are, in Peru, there's once a year a service summit, And there are several possibilities of cooperation between Peruvian companies and foreign companies. And I'm sure that the same happens in all the other countries of the Pacific Alliance.
Mr. Posada, I wanted to ask, we talked a little bit earlier about the FARC, and someone in the audience wanted to find out about whether or not you're convinced that there will be peace coming to Colombia despite some of the setbacks, the political setbacks we've seen recently.
Would you repeat the question, please?
Okay.
Yes, and slowly,
there
please.
is a question from the audience about FARC and peace in Colombia. Despite some of the political setbacks we have seen recently, how optimistic are you that this peace deal will go to fruition?
Very optimistic. I think what happened with the plebiscite is just an opportunity to fine-tune the agreement and make it acceptable to a large majority of Colombians. The plebiscite was won by a very marginal majority, and I'm very happy to see how the government is being humble enough to listen to the winners of the no in the plebiscite in order to take that as an opportunity to reunite the country by gathering and listening seriously and honestly to the objections of the winners of the no. So whatever is going to come out is going to be a strong and very much supported peace agreement with the FARC, with a lot of support from Colombians.
So you are fairly optimistic that this peace deal will last?
Very much, and I really believe that there is a clear opportunity to have it signed by the end of this year.
I guess for a number of people, that's very heartening, and I suspect that this lasting peace deal will have really good dividends for the GCC and other countries around the world that are seeking to do business with Colombia.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is one more tick in the checklist saying, okay, is there security there? Are we free to go to the remote parts of the country where the natural resources are? And definitely, it has already improved a lot, the physical security, because there is a truce and there haven't been any violent crimes committed by the guerrillas in a number of months already.
I'm curious, what do you think the region can learn, not just Latin America, but also countries of the Middle East and elsewhere, about this this peace deal that has been signed and is about to become a reality?
I didn't follow your question. I'm sorry.
What do you think that the countries of the GCC, as well as the countries around the world, can learn from the tremendous risk that President Santos took in negotiating this peace deal?
I think the big lesson there is the simple lesson that every human being should keep in mind all the time, is that we have 2 ears to listen and 1 mouth to speak. And we just have to learn to listen twice as much and be sensitive to the needs and sensitivities of the people. And again, I would relate that to what just happened in the US with the vote, and there is a lot more to listen to the American people who are protesting through the vote.
Mr. Jose Luis, wanted to ask you, because that's a question as someone who used to be in government, about the peace deal that you've seen in Colombia, and what impact do you think it will have more broadly with the Pacific Alliance, the fact that at least one of your partners is about to end a 50-year civil war?
¿Te entendiste?
Yo no entendí nada,
Nada.
del punto.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
Can you- yeah,
we
I know
cannot
that-
listen what you are asking, or it's not clear.
Okay.
If I hear, how is the peace treaty will benefit the Pacific Alliance?
Exactly, exactly.
Well, first of all, we are very happy that Colombia is finishing with a very sad situation where Colombians are killing Colombians, and this will be, well, I think it's already finished. It's only a time, it will take weeks or months to have the final agreement, but now they have peace in the country, and what will happen is that basically Peru and Colombia, because we have boundaries, Chile and Mexico have no boundaries with Colombia. We will have peace in our boundaries because these people, although there were guerrillas in Colombia, but they were promoting drug dealing among our countries and exporting drugs to the world. This will help us, Mr. Posada said, to focus all our energy, all our funds in other things than investing in arms or investing in security in our countries. For sure, it will be very positive for Colombia and very positive for the Pacific Alliance, for the region in general.
I'll give you an example, John, is we have been very keen on making sure that a very small proportion of goods that are traded, which are the illegal goods, do not go into other countries. So drug trade, which is very small in terms of the amount of goods being traded, is having a major impact in the way people design protections in order to make sure that drugs are not coming into other countries. So 99.9% of the goods traded are facing some kind of obstacles in order to protect the 0.1% of goods to come into those countries, which is legitimate. Once you have a peace that is sustainable and strong with the FARC, they have committed to fight drug trade, and therefore the free movement of other goods will be easier because there will be a less prejudice against the trade of goods in general just based on that illegal trade.
There have been several questions from the audience along the lines of what benefits or what assistance can the Pacific Alliance countries give to small businesses in the GAE. Any one of you want to tackle the question about what opportunities are there in terms of assistance that some of the small businesses in this region can get from the Pacific Alliance?
Ooh. One example is, specific example of what I am involved now in. I've been in transportation, and now is in the ports business. And there must be a lot of small and medium UAE companies who are experts on providing services to the transportation industry, either airlines or shipping companies or ports, and that is a specific opportunity of UAE companies in the region.
Let me add something about regarding agriculture and horticulture specifically. We foresee that in the case of Colombia, there are many very good possibilities in many areas. For example, avocados, where we are big exporters and producers. And that will allow, first, to have more people involved in terms of small businesses, yeah? And also the possibility to have a broader season of, for selling avocados. And we think that's a very good possibility because we understand that the government of Colombia is searching also the development of this type of activities.
A question?
Hello, I'm Juan. I'm from Chile, and I have a question in connection with the comparison between the Pacific Alliance and Mercosur. Why is the Pacific Alliance a best alliance, a better alliance? And is there a possibility that other countries are incorporated into the Pacific Alliance? And then the other question is whether our countries are prepared in terms of their infrastructure to increase and improve their exports to other countries.
Well, Mercosur is a trade organization, as you said, more internally than searching exports. And it's, I think it's politically based. It was found, generated as a political organization working in the area of trade. And nowadays it changed because politically there are some changes in Brazil, changes in Argentina. We'd foresee maybe changes in Venezuela soon also. But with those changes, there is a better possibility to have a broader spectrum of activities with Mercosur rather than in the past. In the past was something more inland, inside Mercosur, and I think right now it's, we are better off in terms of having a better relationship with them as a Pacific Alliance, and countries, of course.
Gentlemen, we're just about out of time. Jose Luis, you wanted to answer?
Yes. Regarding to the question of how can companies, small or medium companies, can be helped by the Pacific Alliance, all our 4 countries in the Pacific Alliance have some kind of agency that promote investment, and also we have institutions that can help the matching between a Peruvian company, a Chilean company, Mexican or Colombian company with one company of this part of the world. And the opportunities are hundreds. It can be in the mining sector, it can be in the food security industry, it can be in the wood section, in clothing industry, in any industry that you can think. All our countries have opportunities. The avocado is one example of many fruits, vegetables that can be produced in our region. Mexico is the #1 exporter of avocados in the world. Peru is the #2, Chile is the #3, I think, and we expect to be the number 1 very soon as Peru. So there are thousands of opportunities that companies, funds of the United Arab Emirates can have in our region.
Gentlemen, we're just about out of time, so I want to give you an opportunity to give your closing arguments. As I said, but we'll start with Mr. Posada and then Mr. Bown and Mr. Jose Luis. For anyone in the audience interested in doing business with the Pacific Alliance, what's the best advice you can give?
Look, I would close by highlighting a comment on infrastructure. There is a major lack of infrastructure in those countries. Specifically in Colombia, there are more than $40 billion of infrastructure projects to improve competitiveness of the country, and that requires a lot of funding, and that funding is still uncompleted. So there is a specific opportunity for those funds and investors who are looking for a place to invest in infrastructure, which is designed in terms of APPs, public-private partnerships, PPPs, concessions, and so forth. So this is not public works, this is privatized infrastructure that is very effective, and it has evolved into a fourth generation of improvements of the concession approach. And the four countries are trying to establish an infrastructure funding investment fund to leverage the financial needs to invest in infrastructure in the four countries.
Mr. Bown?
Talking about Chile, I would say that Chile has very good possibilities in terms of doing business worldwide. It's not only the Pacific Alliance. We have, as I said before, if you go to Chile and put your own company there, you're open, you have the world open in terms of possibilities with more than 66 countries with trade agreements with us. So it's an easy way to establish in Chile in terms of funding a company, and it's a good place to live also.
And Jose Luis Silva?
Well, among the four countries that are part of this Pacific Alliance, I think that the UAE companies will have a possibility of investment, as I said minutes ago, in almost all the sectors of the industry. Specifically in Peru, there's the possibility of being in a country where the foreign capitals are treated as local. There's free movement of money, free movement of people, and for sure, in our four countries, we are going to a new era where the people, our people, are better qualified, are people that are interested in being part of a free market, and specifically, we think that the money, the funds, the investments that you will have, you can be sure that you will have a very good return. Now in Peru, the companies are having, in most of the cases, double-digit results.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Please, everyone, join me in thanking them for this very informative session.